So I climbed under here to see if I could find anything loose or wiggling, and there's my skid plate. I think the manual calls it a belly plate, or belly pan technically. You can see it was kind of loose and wiggling, and that was exactly the sound I was hearing. So I'm going to show you how this thing is supposed to be connected. In the back there are 4 bolts. There's one here, one there, and then the same on the other side. There and there. There's one on each side. You can see it, one there, one here. Those 6 bolts hold the skid plate to the frame. Those are 10mm bolts. I think the thread is 6x1, M6x1. And you can see in the back, the 2 in the back just are kind of scalloped. So what you can do when you're taking this thing out, you leave those 2 in, just loosen them, take all the other bolts out, and then the plate can shift that way a little bit out from the lip of the bumper, and then you can bring it this way on out. So there's those 6 bolts, and then in the front there are 4 more bolts in the front. There's one there, one there, one there, and one there. Those are 13mm bolts, M8 by 1.25 threads, and those 4 also hold the skid plate to the frame. Now there are 5 more bolts. These are not the original bolts, by the way, but there's 5 more. There's one here, 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 and here. And those 5 are the dumb bolts. Those are T30 Torx bits. And those 5 hold the bumper to the skid plate. So where the problem comes in is if you're doing an oil change, technically you should remove the skid plate to do your oil change. But the oil change places, I don't know, some may do it, but most probably don't do it. Either they're trying to save time, or they can't get these bolts out. And so what they do is they take all of the bolts holding the skid plate to the frame, so the 4 in the front, the 6 in the back, and they just let the skid plate hang from the bumper, is what I'm guessing they do. That gives them enough room to get to the drain and to the oil filter, which you can maybe see it here. So there's the oil filter. You can see there's a little shield around it. It is all bent, probably because, you know, they can't actually get in there with the skid plate still on. So anyway, when I got under here, I've taken this all off, but when I first got under here, the 4 bolts in the back were still there, but the 2 on the side were not there. The 4 big bolts in the front holding the skid plate to the frame were also not there. The 4 of the 5 bolts holding the bumper to the frame were still there. So essentially what was happening is the back was connected to the frame, the front was just dangling by the bumper, and that's why it was rattling. Now I've taken the whole thing out. I've gotten all the bolts out. The 4 in the back were pretty easy to get out. The 2 in the side were missing. These 4 big bolts were missing. These 5, I'm not sure they've ever been off the car. And they're, well, no, they probably were at some point. But they're the Torx bits, so they were stripped. And they hadn't been off in a while, at the very least, because they were in there pretty good. And just the Torx bit alone was nowhere near able to get them out. So I used some, I used a pipe wrench. I'll show you the bolts in a minute, but you can get at them with a. You can see I chewed up my bumper a little bit, which doesn't really matter. But with the pipe wrench, I was able to get those out. So I got all the bolts out. It chased all my threads, cleaned up my threads. I don't know if you can tell, but I painted, I spray painted some white, kind of protecting around all the bolt holes. I don't know if they'll do any good, but probably can't hurt. So these are the bolts. These are the original bolts in the back that hold the skid plate to the frame. These are the 10mm bolts, the M6x1 threads. You see, they're pretty rough, but they weren't bad getting these out. Is it focused? And so originally I got some of these at Autozone, but the flange wasn't big enough. The holes are too big on the plate. These went right through. They work on the 2 side bolts, but not the 4 back bolts. So then I got these. These are actually from Lowe's. Lowe's has a little section of automotive screws and bolts. So these are almost an exact match. The washer's a little bit smaller, just a little bit, but these work just fine. So those are the back bolts. I don't know what the original bolts look at. The 4 front bolts that hold the skid plate to the frame, I don't know what those look like. They're all gone. The 13mm heads and M8 by 1.25 thread. And these I bought at AutoZone as well, and these work fine. I think that they're just ordinary. I think zinc bolts or whatever. If you can get like some stainless steel or something that has a little bit of corrosion protection, probably be good. And then these are the dumb bolts. These are the Torx bolts, T30, and it's the same thread as the back bolts, the M6x1. Yeah, but these were completely, they were stripped and they were in there pretty tight. So you can see it chewed up on the side. I was able to, get at them with a pipe wrench and get them out that way. And so I'm using these for the front. I just have some washers. And I just, again, I painted these white. A little bit of, might help out a little bit. So that'll be the 5 bolts in the front that hold the bumper to the skid plate. So that's about it.